Hi, everybody. How are you doing? I'm Dr. Gail, and this is Barbara Lamb. And thanks, Barbara, for joining us today. And I'm all excited about the discussion we're going to have about your regression therapy and your interesting cases that you've had with that. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about you first, and then I'll say hello to some people coming in. And if people who don't know Barbara, she is a extraterrestrial experiencer and past life therapist. She's a UFO expert. She's a crop circle researcher and lecturer. She's been on TV multiple times on multiple things. But what we're looking at today is her regression therapy for the extraterrestrials or the experiences people are having these days. And she has regressed people back to get more detail about what happened. I've had several sessions with her, which we went all the way back to my childhood to find out at what age I started going up to spaceships, which turned out to be I was an infant. So I've been going up all my life. And I was able to describe the room and everything to her, where I went in and what they did to me. And so regression therapy, if you're interested in a certain event or certain questions, Barbara can regress you back because you have the answers within yourself. She just taps in to that part of you that remembers. So I want to say hello to some people. Hey, Jen Carr. Hey, Warrior Widow. Hey, Patricia Hernandez. Look at what you've got, Patricia. You've got a wrench. That means you're a moderator. Hey, Linda Thompson. Thanks for being here. And Barbara, do you have anything to add about your regression therapy sessions?
Well, just that I am continuing to do them, and we can do them in person in San Diego, California, where I am, or we can do them online. Many people are doing sessions on Zoom or Skype or StreamYard or WhatsApp or FaceTime. And these work just as well as sessions in person, which is wonderful because that opens it up to more people who would like to do that work.
I know we have to thank COVID for that.
Yes, we do.
Because we would have never ventured into that area if it hadn't been for COVID and had to force us to do those things. It was like, oh my gosh, this works just as well as if in person. So I think
that's the one thing that I thank COVID for.
Okay, let me see. We've got Charlie Rebartero coming in. Thanks for being here. Hey, Son of Watt. Hey, Sylvia. Thanks for being here. And Barbara's getting ready to start talking about her regression therapy for people who are having extraterrestrial experiences and her most interesting cases. So, Barbara, go ahead. Go ahead and start.
Well, there are so many interesting cases. For me, every single one is interesting, so it's difficult to choose, but I will choose. So mostly, since 1991, I have been doing regressions to people's extraterrestrial experiences. And in some cases, the person really doesn't know that they've had such an experience, but there are clues. And I'd like to mention the clues because some of you listening might possibly relate to some of those clues and begin to really think about, have you had any of these experiences?
Yeah, I get that question a lot in here about people going, they're here, they're interested in the channel, but they're going, I don't remember anything. But just the fact that they're here listening to this information, they've had some kind of experience.
Yeah, so sometimes people are aware of having a UFO sighting that's pretty close, not just a little star-like light up in the sky, but one coming, considerably closer, or even maybe over the house that they live in, or over the yard, or and that gets them wondering, do I have anything to do with this? I keep seeing these, and I mean, some people see them, one night and then another night and another over a period of years, and that really gets them to wonder. But a very typical thing is that a person wakes up at night when they're sleeping, and their sleeping partner, if they have one, seems to be really, really, really deeply asleep, or anybody else sleeping in the room. Anyway, the person will wake up, and sometimes we'll see a bright light, like a white light, coming in through the window and moving around the room, kind of like a searchlight. Or it might be a light that just kind of comes in and fills up the room. Or they might not even be aware of light, but they might wake up one night and just sense that there's somebody there in the room who shouldn't be there. And then if they wake up even further, they might see beings standing there in the room, across the room, or around the bed, or at the foot of the bed. Those are typical scenarios. And then usually they don't remember anything after that. Not that nothing happened, but that they are made to be unconscious of what transpires next. So anyway, that's a clue, waking up at night and sensing that there's somebody there, or seeing the light, or seeing orbs of light moving around in the bedroom. But other clues include looking down at your body and noticing that, oh my goodness, you've got these unusual markings there. They might be like a perfect circle shape of what look like pinprick marks, little pink dots. Or it might be a triangular shape or a square shape. But in any case, the shapes are perfect, made of these little dots. And typically, the person has no idea how that little pattern appeared on their skin while they were sleeping. And these dots, these little patterns, could be just about anywhere. That could be on the chest, or the shoulder, or the stomach, or the back, or the legs. And then there are also little bruises on some people, particularly women, that would look like little finger tip bruises, little kind of round bruises, particularly for women on the upper inner thighs, as if the legs had been pried open. And then another clue is what many people have who have these experiences, and that is a scoop-shaped mark. Like, it looks like a very tiny melon scoop just came in and took it out. So it doesn't go through the seventh layer of skin, but it definitely is an indentation in the skin. And that could be just about anywhere on the body. The first one I ever saw on a man way back in 1990, it was on his thigh. Oh, no, I'm sorry, his calf, the muscly part of the calf. But I've seen them on people's thighs and arms and all kinds of places. And that turns out to be very significant, because we have come to believe that the tissue that's taken in that scoop mark, the tissue is used by the extraterrestrial beings to embed around an implant, which is then put into the person's body. And so that's another clue too, by the way, that sometimes people will feel somewhere on their body, maybe their arm or somewhere, they'll feel like maybe a little sort of sensation under the skin.
Yeah, mine's right ear. Mine's
okay.
on the right earlobe, yeah.
All right. And then when the person touches it, wherever they are feeling it, it moves a little bit. It feels about the size of a BB. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty small. And that implant is very, very important for a number of reasons, because It helps to locate people. I think that's the most commonly known reason for implants. Uh, in other words, a person or the beings work with a person over a course of many years, a lifetime in many cases. And they want to be able to find that person when they're ready to work with that person again. So it is a tracking device, and it is more. The implants serve other functions too. Uh, Sometimes they give information, like channeling to the person.
Right.
Sometimes they receive information from the person. Sometimes the implant allows them to have a sense of seeing through that person's eyes so that
Now,
they can see
oh,
kind of what it's like to be a human.
yeah, can I ask you a little bit more about that part of it,
Sure.
about extraterrestrials looking through the person's eyes, just to experience being human? How common are you seeing that? Because I feel like that's a lot of times what I'm doing, where they're looking through my
Uh-huh.
eyes and seeing what I'm doing, and they'll kind of direct me into what kind of experience they want to have. So
Right.
sometimes I feel like my life is orchestrated because this is what they want to experience, even though I have free will. But I do think sometimes I get a little nudge in what they want to experience.
Right. Well, that must be really quite something to experience. Um, so many of the beings are really, really interested in us humans, and they care about us humans, many of them. And so sometimes they just want to have the experience of being a human, and yet they couldn't really do that physically because they wouldn't be able to survive here. They wouldn't be able to withstand our bacteria and viruses and energies, frequencies. And of course, they usually don't look human enough that they would be accepted in society. So that's really one of the ways that they can get to know about us and life on Earth more. So I have definitely worked with other people, not all the people I have worked with, but with some who have that sense that the beings is looking through their eyes at times.
Yeah.
It's not a constant thing.
No. Well,
Uh,
wouldn't do them any good to look through your eyes while you're sleeping.
right. Well, and then we have to do other things in our lives too, rather than just listening to
Yeah.
that voice.
Yeah,
But
I'd
that,
agree that it's only when you're doing interesting things, but I think also, but what fascinates me is that nudge. Like, I think the nudge for me to move out to Mount Shasta kind of came from that they wanted me to experience that. Plus they wanted to experience it. And now I'm in a coastal town, and I think a lot of that is they want to experience that now. So I think, so I get little nudges like that.
uh-huh. And I have heard this from some other people too, who have these connections with the beings, have these experiences with the beings. So let's see, I'm just wondering about any other clues. Yes, a very major clue of having these kinds of encounters with the other beings is what we call missing time.
Mm.
And missing time can happen anywhere in any situation. And typically, people really, really notice it, especially when they're driving a car or riding in a car. And they know pretty much when they are expecting to get to their destination and is chugging along. And then usually they'll see a light in the sky and it comes closer and closer, and the car motor stops, and the person quickly drives it off the road to be safe. And then the light, which is really a UFO craft, the craft may land, and out will come some little beings who are not human and come over to the people in the car and take them on board the craft, for a whole experience. And that experience usually lasts at least an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes even a little bit longer. But anyway, the people sort of become conscious again, uh, having been returned to their seats in the car, usually even the correct seats that they had been in, and although not always, and they become conscious, and they don't see the beings or the craft or the light anymore, and they look at each other and say, "Why are we here on the side of the road? Why is the car motor off?" And then they realize too that uh, later on that they had gotten to their destination a couple of hours later than they had thought they would. So that's a very, very typical thing that has happened to many people. But it's also happened to people who've been with other people in a very conscious state, active in life. For instance, one man I regressed had been at about age 10 or 11 or so. He went to one day in the regression when he had been riding his bicycle with a group of friends, several friends, and they were in the schoolyard, the paved cement schoolyard, which was a great place to ride their bicycles. And they built ramps and little steps and things and did all these trick riding capers and having a great time mid-afternoon after school. And then suddenly my client realized that it was dark and all of his friends were gone. All of the bicycles were gone, except for his bicycle, which was lying on the pavement where he had been riding. And then when he went home, and his parents said, "We wanted you home before dark. Why are you so late?" And he said, I don't know. And in other words, he was taken without even being realizing that anything was coming to take him.
That went over well with his parents, that
Oh, yeah.
answer.
Oh, it overwhelmed his parents and him, and something that he wondered about for decades. And finally, well, I'd say in his 60s, his 50s, almost 60, he came to me for a regression saying, ever since I was 10 years old, I just have wondered about that afternoon. And then there were other things, going on too that made him wonder. And it turned out that, yes, indeed, he is a regular experiencer of extraterrestrial contact. And it turns out not to have been something to be afraid of. It turns out to be something where it was really helpful for him and certainly very, very interesting. That's for sure. And people can be taken from a beach party or a living room party, and the other people around are just made to be out of conscious awareness during that time period, that experience when the person is taken on board a craft and whatever happens is going on there. So anyway, those are some of the clues that make people wonder if they have had contact. And if you've had a few of those clues, chances are very, very likely that you've been having these experiences. If none of them resonate with you at all, you probably have not had these encounters. So anyway,
what if they don't fit any of those categories, but yet they're here interested in what's being said? I still feel like those people have some kind of connection, because I find that
yes,
people who have some extraterrestrial experiences or connections, they're the only ones that understand being here in this chat. They're the only ones understand these experiences. And anybody else who has not, they're like poo-pooing and moving on, and I don't understand it, let me move on. So even if anybody in here doesn't remember or doesn't think they had experiences and they're interested in the subject matter, I tend to still think they're having experiences but not remembering any of that.
Yes, I tend to feel the same way about it. And we wouldn't really know, I think, unless we did a regression. In other words, if they are very, very interested, like I have been myself, um, and yet they don't think that they've had anything like that happen to them, um, they can always, if they wish to, they can always have a regression to explore that. Like basically, I try to keep everything very neutral as we go into a regression and not to assume anything. So I would focus the regression on around the person wanting to know why they have such an intense interest in extraterrestrials.
Right. I
Or
have a
they would
question
first,
for you about that. What if somebody, because fear is another big factor in people not remembering or pushing it back, just the fear of what happened because it was out of their control. And if
yes.
it's out of the control, a lot of people can't handle that and they go right into fear. So when you do regress them, I feel like even some of those people who have that kind of reaction, who have that fear reaction, have that I've got to be in control reaction, that they would be difficult to regress for that kind of memory.
Well, people think that they're going to be difficult to regress, but I assure them that whatever they discover, uh, they're going to be all right. They're going to, that they, if anything like that happened, that they did come back and they were intact and they went on with their life. And so whatever they might find out probably isn't that bad and might even have been very beneficial, which is really true. So many people have come to me feeling fear about finding out, and yet some clue or several have really bothered them for many years. And they finally get to the point, okay, I've just got to find out what's going on, like it or not. And
Well,
but
also society kind of pushes that away from them too, because that does not fit in the norm of society, especially a strong religious background, which it goes against everything about that. So it sometimes that person has that hurdle to overcome before they are accepting of these kind of experiences.
yes, there's a lot that can get in the way of accepting that these sorts of things happen, that this is really part of reality. But I think it's coming out more and more that this is part of reality. And the congressional hearings about UAPs, unide- unidentified aerial phenomenon, do that. Those help bring it to the attention of people. And I think more and more people are just becoming aware because it's more in the culture in general, you know.
Yes.
So I think a lot of younger people these days, oh yeah, of course there are extraterrestrials. Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah, they come here.
Yeah.
We see their UFOs and they come and visit people, and it's no big deal. I
Right.
mean, but it was definitely a big deal for me when I started learning about this in the late 1980s and began regressing people to extraterrestrial encounters in 1991. And it's been a few thousand regressions I have done, probably 5,000 now. So there's a lot of variety that happens. And you were wondering about some of the interesting cases.
Yeah. Well, I was going to
There,
ask one thing about the younger people. There, it's actually in their vocabulary, their language. They talk about it like it's normal. Whereas
right.
we're still having difficulty of being suppressed from, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s on. We were suppressed about we're crazy if you have those experiences. So we're all kind of wounded warriors. And so
Right,
from
right,
that
absolutely.
experience and trying to hush and pretend like it didn't happen. But when the younger people who are coming out now, they don't have those hurdles. They accept it. It's normal to them.
Well, one young man approached me just a couple of days ago. He wanted to have a long conversation with me because he is writing his dissertation for his doctoral degree about
In what? What's his doctorate in?
uh, the dissertation is about alien abduction.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering what his PhD might be in because I didn't even know that they had degrees now in paranormal activities and things like that. Because I mean, Duke University even has a program that has degrees in those kind of areas now.
Right. Well, he didn't say even which university or what the doctoral program is called, but there is a program that I have contributed to um, in terms of teaching. It's called Ubiquity University. Ubiquity University. You can find it online. And they have a certificate program in UFO activity, particularly the beings. And that's the one that I taught. And it it's online, so people can sign up and tune into that anytime they want.
Would that
Also,
be on your website to find that? Is that how they?
I think they would just go right to Ubiquity, Ubiquity,
Okay.
Ubiquity University, and then they also offer a master's degree program and a PhD program in UFO studies. So
So that's
good.
but that's being accepted now for these major universities.
Right.
But that's part of the acceptance of the younger people, because that's normal. This is what I'm interested in because this is what I'm going to. Can you imagine when we were coming along, going to college and saying, oh, this is what we're going to major in?
Oh, I had never even heard of it or thought of it.
You would be disowned.
However, uh, when I was in college, I majored in philosophy
Okay.
because I always have been very inquiring about what else is there that we don't know about, we don't see, what's real, what's really going on. So I think that was an indication that I would be open to learning about all of this.
Right.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. Well, one of the cases that I would like to mention, it was a man I worked with for probably about 10 years doing regressions every several weeks for all of that time. So that was a lot of regressions actually
Yeah.
for the one person. And right at the very beginning, the reason he came to me is that he had been walking down the main street of his town with a friend, and he walked past a hobby shop and just happened to glance in the window, the big display window of the hobby shop, and noticed that there was a model of a UFO and the box that it would come in. And he recognized that UFO. He said, "Oh, that's the sport model. That's the one I know how to fly." And he was amazed that he said that. And his friend was even more amazed. And he went right in and bought that model and took it home so he could put it together and just sort of live with it.
Yeah.
And he felt incredibly familiar. He said he knew how the workings were, he knew how everything was arranged inside. And then, of course, he wondered how on earth did he know any of that? Up to that point, he had not been aware that lifelong he had been having lots of contacts with extraterrestrial beings.
Obviously. If you
So he came in for a regression, and we discovered that he had had a regression so early in his life that he was still in his mother's womb.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so as a fetus, probably about 8 months or so along in developing in the womb, um, he had a congenital hole in his heart. Now, nobody knew that. The doctors and his mother didn't know that. But suddenly, one night, this came up in the regression. Here he was, sloshing around comfortably in his mother's womb and all cozy and, just easing his way around. And then suddenly he felt an unusual heat coming to him through his mother's womb. And then he heard, it might have been telepathically, it might have been with his ears, but anyway, heard somebody sounding male outside the womb saying, don't worry, I am helping you. You have a congenital hole in your heart. And if you are born with this, you will not live very long at all. And I want you to live. So I am putting an invisible electromagnetic strip over the hole in your heart, which he did through the wall of the uterus and the wall of the abdomen of the mother. So that baby was born and lived. And so his heart was not bleeding because of the invisible electromagnetic strip. And he realized, we did many regressions, and realized that every year or so he would be visited by the same extraterrestrial being who would refurbish the invisible electromagnetic strip over the hole.
as he was growing. Yeah, as he was growing.
Yeah, as he was growing. So every year as he was growing up, so it means all of childhood and teenage years, and then occasionally as an adult. So anyway, he grew up to be a big 6'4" strong man, and did a lot of physical labor in his life. And he certainly would not have been able to do that or get to that age if that hole in his heart had not been taken care of in that way. And finally, when he was in his very late 40s, having had a very, very active life, he did have a heart problem. And he went to the hospital to have a surgical procedure done in his heart. And his wife happened to be a surgical nurse, and she got permission to be in the operating room when the surgery was going on.
We never let family go in and watch.
No, I mean, that was very unusual, but she really convinced them that she had a good reason to want to know what was happening. So when the surgeon operated on him, opened up his heart, and he exclaimed, "Whoa, this man has a hole in his heart about the size of a silver dollar. That's amazing that he's alive." And yet here was this hole, very obviously to see, and yet it was just bleeding out a tiny, tiny bit. And so, of course, he fixed that surgically, and the man went on to live more years. But anyway, the wife was very impressed with the surgeon saying, yeah, he has a hole in his heart the size of a silver dollar, because by that time she had known about the husband and this having happened to him with the extraterrestrial being. So that didn't come up in surgery about the extraterrestrial refurbishing of the electromagnetic strip over the hole. But anyway, that was kind of a nice confirmation about that whole situation. So that was really great. And it turns out also that his wife was an experiencer also and had not been aware of that until she came with him one time to do a regression for him. And here she is, an innocent spouse, thinking that she could relate to this, but she was curious and interested, wanted to know what was happening for her husband. So I noticed that while I was leading him through the regression with his lying on my sofa, and she was in another chair in the room, a few feet away, and I noticed that she was sort of nodding off too and being very relaxed, going into a nice state of deep relaxation. So while I was focused on him and doing his regression, she was having a lot of realizations too, a lot of little bleed throughs of incidents that she had had with some of the extraterrestrial beings. So then I started working with her, and oh yeah, she had many interesting things. In fact, on one occasion in the regression, she went onto a craft, and then they put her in a special room that had about 4 big, what she called a pod. It was like a bathysphere, a big round structure full of liquid.
Mhm.
And she was unclothed and then put into that bathysphere and stayed there. She thought it seemed like for a couple of days. And there was a little window in the top of this pod. And every once in a while, she was aware that there was an extraterrestrial face that would be looking in her pod just to see how she was doing. And it turned out that she could breathe in the fluid in that pod and without choking or anything, being perfectly all right, and especially for that long period of time. And then suddenly somebody, a being, came and stopped everything from moving, the pod, and opened the hatch and took her out onto the floor, and she coughed out whatever excess fluid might be in her lungs. And she noticed that with the other 3 pods, a person was being taken out and kind of choking up that fluid that they had been drinking or breathing in. And anyway, they were all right. And then she was put into a big robe with a hood that came way out beyond her face, a stiff hood, so that to see her, somebody would have to come right directly in front of her. And it had sort of a rope-like thing to tie around the waist, and that was happening for the other people too, who had been in pods. And then she and the others were led along a very, very large corridor. It certainly seemed like this was a very big mothership. And they walked and walked, and it was an extraterrestrial being who was walking beside her and other beings besides the other 3 beings. And then finally, they got to sort of a fork in the hallway, and she knew exactly which one they were to take, and remembered then that she had somehow done this before, even though she'd not been consciously aware of it. And they went into a very big amphitheater type room with different raised levels in a circle around a center stage. And she was ushered up to about the 4th row up from the bottom and sat in a particular chair with about 3 or 4 other humans there. She could notice if she leaned way forward and looked in there,
Mhm.
there woods. And so she was at a big council meeting, and none of this she had any inkling of consciously. But anyway, she went right through the whole council meeting, and it turned out that she was a delegate from Earth, and she was a very responsible person, being a surgical nurse and everything. And they were discussing a particular problem that day, and that was about problem Earth, planet Earth. They had long ago done so much genetic work with us humans that they had made a very big mistake, that among the genetics with many, many humans, they had included that aspect of aggressivity and spaciousness and warlikeness and greed. They mentioned quite a few of the characteristics that many of us are aware of and really bother us and cause so many problems in the world. And so they wondered what they should do about that, because there is this aspect, this principle in the universe of non-interference. And yet they had interfered way back eons ago when they helped to create us and add their DNA. So they wondered, what should we do? Should we interfere with the DNA of these people on Earth, or what? Or just let them go and blow themselves up and ruin their whole species? So the stakes were high, and they didn't come to a conclusion, according to my client, that particular meeting, but it is definitely of concern to a number of different species out there in space.
Let me ask you a question about what she went through in the tank, or whatever you call it, because I've been, being from the medical background, I have been the one monitoring those type of things. And my understanding of what she was going through, or what those four beings were going, they were all representatives of Earth, but they were cleansing them.
Yeah.
They were cleansing them because they could not have humans exposing all the other extraterrestrials in the meeting with Earth germs, basically.
Right. So that's what the being in the pod was about, with that special fluid.
Yes. Well, let me address the people in the chat here. So we won't be taking questions today. We're just going to be talking about Barbara's experiences. I'm sorry, everybody that's putting questions in. I appreciate your questions. I'm not ignoring you, but I'm really interested in hearing her regression therapy, the interesting cases that she's doing today. I will be able to answer your questions probably next week. So I just don't, I'm not just ignoring you, and you're all, I appreciate all your questions, and I am interested in all that in them. But today we're focusing on Barbara's experiences. Thanks.
Okay. Well, there are just so many that, a few thousand. So, but another one that stands out is a whole different person. It was a woman who came to me when she was in about her early 50s, I think, and worked on and off with me in regressions for probably 8 or 9 or 10 years. When she was 4 years old, her grandmother died. And that night, anyway, she went to the funeral. She didn't understand it because she was only 4 years old. But anyway, that night, when her parents were in the living room, she sensed or heard something outside the back door. And as a little girl, she went and opened the back door, and there were a few, about 3 or 4, unusual beings. And one of them was just about her height at age 4. And she felt fairly comfortable with that one, except that from her point of view, he was pretty weird looking, and he had this sort of grayish skin and really big black eyes. But he was her size. So she felt, oh, that's a different kind of kid. Well, I guess he's all right. And then another one was a different type, it seemed like, and was somewhat taller, maybe about the size of her mother or father. And then there was a great, very tall one who looked like a bug, like a big insect, turned out to be a mantis being. And they said, you are to come with us now. And she said, well, I don't mind going with you and with you, but that one is a big bug, and I don't think I want to go with him. It turns out he was
He's
a
the one
mantis.
you should want to go with.
Yeah. So anyway, it turned out over time that that big bug, that mantis being, who was very, very white and always wore a long white robe and seemed to be extremely thin and, definitely not human, that's for sure, that he was the one who came many, many times over decades to take her for her extraterrestrial experiences. Uh, Usually, I do not hear of a mantis being one of the ones to escort the person.
Well, it's mantis beings that show me my future all the time, what my next job's going to be. Whenever they show up, in fact, the first time I met one, I was going, I met a grasshopper yesterday. I didn't know what mantis were. I met this grasshopper, and he told me what my future was going to be and what I was going to do. And so every time, there's two things I see, and when they show up with two grays, that means it's going to be some kind of healing or surgery or something's going to happen to you. But when they show up individually, I know that they're getting ready to show me what my next job is, and they just don't tell you. They put you in that job for you to experience it immediately, going, now this is what you're going to do. Boom, you're there.
Oh my goodness, their abilities are so remarkable, really. Yeah, I admire them hugely. Actually, feel that. Well, yeah, thank you. That's very interesting to know. So anyway, it turned out that in many of the regressions that this woman and I did, that it would be the mantis being, the tall white one, the big bug, who would come for her. And it would happen for her any time of day or night. Sometimes during the daytime, she'd be busy doing housework or whatever she was doing. And then suddenly she just felt incredibly tired, like just like turning on the switch of fatigue. And she'd stagger over to a couch to lie down. Or I know one time she was just halfway up the stairs, crawling up the stairs in order to rest on her bed.
Yeah, I've experienced that many times.
Have you? Yeah. And then the being.
That's when you lose your time.
Especially.
That's I have lost time when that happens.
Wow. And so then the halfway up the stairs, she was aware that the tall white mantis being was there, and he just kind of picked her up or scooped her up, swooshed her up, whatever that was. And she never did make it to the bed on that occasion. He just took her right out through the wall and out into space and onto a spaceship. So he took her to a number of different kinds of experiences, which we were discovering over the years during regressions. And I know one time he took her to what looked like a big city of glass out in space, like a big floating city.
Right.
Nothing supporting it. But there were lots of different shapes of the buildings. There were dome shapes and spires and all kinds of different shapes, all seeming to be made of glass. So he took her so they were not in a craft. They just traveled through space, and somehow that was okay. And he took her into one of those glass buildings and introduced her to a particular being not a human being and not a mantis being, but a different kind of extraterrestrial being, tall, male. And that one said, okay, I'm going to be teaching you something very important. I realize that you tend to distort what you see when you see a being that is different than you human beings. You tend to see the ugliest, most horrible face. And of course, they know that telepathically.
Right.
He said, but we would like you to see us as we really are, and that we're not really so frightening after all to you humans. So he kept showing her different beings and telepathically could tell what she was doing in her mind as she was seeing those other beings, how she was distorting the look of their faces into really grotesque faces that would frighten any human.
Right.
And he caught her each time she was doing that distorting and had her back off and then try again and look more clearly until she learned how to really distinguish the face as it actually was. So this got her to be a bit more comfortable with the fact that she was being taken on board with various kinds of extraterrestrial beings. And that mantis being in the long white robe sometimes took her to very different experiences, usually on a spacecraft, where she would be taught various things. Sometimes she would have a physical examination by some of the shorter beings, the little gray type beings. But they always reassured her that they were checking for her benefit. And if there was anything amiss in her body, they would go ahead and heal it. And there's so many cases I have worked with where there's been healing done on the ship.
Oh, yeah.
The extraterrestrial beings, usually with some form of light. Seems like a very bright white light.
Well, one of my first jobs on Astromedical 1, we used a lot of light therapy because I was a surgeon on that spaceship, and that was a big part of the healing was light therapy. So,
Good. Yeah, and people describe it in various ways, as this woman did on a number of occasions. Sometimes it would come like just a light from above and seem to fill and surround the person lying on a table. And sometimes it would come through a big gadget that looked kind of like a big flashlight. And sometimes it would
used it looked like a big flashlight.
Okay. And the person knew it wasn't really a flashlight, but that's what it reminded her of. And then sometimes it comes in more of a rolling pin kind of apparatus, which rolls up over the body and over the head and brings healing with it. It's emitting that wonderful white light that seems to be doing the healing. And sometimes it's done by hands-on healing from the beings, various types of beings. And sometimes it seems to be just encompassing the person and the table that the person is on. The person is just in this glowing, warm light. It feels wonderful, of course. And it's doing some really serious healing work when that is needed. And then there are cases when people have their brain, I have several people who had this happen. They'd be on board the ship, and then the brain would be taken out of their head. Somehow they continued to live. And like in one case, the lady was sent into the next room. She said, go into the next room. It's a playroom. Just play. And we'll be working on your brain.
Right.
And so they took the brain out and set her into the next room, which was like an adult playroom. I mean, adult size, slides and sandboxes and swings and jungle gym and things like that. And so they wanted her to be carefree.
Right.
Don't worry about anything. We're taking care of your brain. Now, we don't understand how they can do that, but they do find ways of doing that.
Well,
And then,
I've done that kind of surgery where they put a halo on their head and these different lights light up and it changes the brain waves, the gamma rays, whatever it's needed, alpha, the gamma, whatever brain waves need to be adjusted. That halo, the lights light up, changing those different brain waves, and that's
oh,
how that's done. Yeah,
how fantastic that you've had those experiences.
yeah,
So anyway, they did their work in one room, and while she was playing in the other room, and then brought her back and put the brain back in again and said, "Okay, now we're through. Everything's better now." She had not been aware, by the way, of having had any difficulty with her brain, but she had experienced being held back from doing what she wanted to do.
right,
She was working in a business company, which was perfectly fine, but she always had the longing for a number of years to create an art studio near where she lived in Southern California. And the studio would not only she would do artwork, but many, many different artists using different media would do the artwork. And then they would have shows and sales and things. And it would be a wonderful creative community. So the being said, when they put the brain back in her head, we have rewired your brain so that now you can do what you really want to do.
yeah,
And lo and behold, after that, she, without even having the regression yet, she somehow really felt different, or her brain was working differently. And
right.
she did rent a big facility and created the art studio and attracted a number of other artists. And they always had music on, and sometimes people would get up and dance. And it was really a really, really happy, creative place. And by the next time that I saw her after that regression we had done, I was so happy that apparently that brain work had really, really made a difference. And here she was living the way she wanted to and accomplishing what she had wanted.
Well, Barbara, we're running out of time.
Okay.
I can't believe it. We have gone. We're running out of time again. We always seem to run out of time. But is there any last words you'd like to say to people?
Yes, that I think there's a lot of fear and mistrust around the subject of extraterrestrial encounters. And I can certainly understand why there is, but I have found in my own thousands of regressions that there are not beings who are trying to harm us or are evil or bad, you know, taking people for these experiences. In fact, in so many cases, the beings are really inspirational and broadening our understanding of things and helping people to be more spiritually aware. And many of them do really care about people and about the earth, and want us to really do what we can to save the earth and improve what's going on with humanity. So basically, the message is that there's a lot of good out there.
Okay. I'm going to add to that for people who are having experiences. The reason it was so easy for me to accept the experiences I was having is because I started off as a medium and I was connecting to people who had passed away. And my dad was my comfort zone on the other side. I would sit on the bench with him, and he would introduce the extraterrestrials to me one at a time. And so he made, well, first I met an angel, and then I started meeting the extraterrestrials, but he made it easy for me. So for people who are wanting to investigate their experiences and are a little afraid, try to do mediumship and connect to somebody on the other side that you trust, and that you can sit there and let them tell you that this is good, this is bad, whatever, that they give you that security and the ability to meet the extraterrestrials.
Well, that brings up a very important point about what the spirit world, which we go to after we die, what that is composed of. More and more, I am getting the sense that not only are human souls there,
Right.
but there are extraterrestrials' souls there, and other dimensional beings' souls in the spirit realm. And that's why we can, if we want to, we can see them if we look for them, and we can get to know them. Our souls can get to know their souls.
Right.
And then there's a lot of interchange that sometimes a human soul, it turns out, has been an extraterrestrial in previous lifetimes, or maybe even a whole string of different kinds of extraterrestrials in previous lifetimes, and being a human in this lifetime. And so souls seem to be able to choose the kinds of conscious beings that they're going to have lifetimes as.
Yes. Okay. Well, as always, Barbara, thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thanks, moderators, for making this a safe place. Saturday, I will be doing the Slayer's Healing Center. People who don't know what that is I have the extraterrestrials who come and help me, that we will take questions and see if we can help everybody. You'll be going in a blue light when the hour starts, and your nervous system will calm down, and your own body will start healing itself. But we'll be doing that on Saturday, and it'll be 12 o'clock Eastern time and 9 o'clock Pacific time. So anyway, thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Barbara. It's always so interesting to talk to you. And all right, everybody, thank you. And we'll see y'all later. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.